What happens when the king who exiled you for being a barren hybrid, a worthless stain on his pure-blood lineage, summons you back 5 years later for a political alliance? What happens when he does so with no memory of the life he destroyed, no inkling of the secret you carried with you into the frozen wastes? He sees only a powerful leader of a thriving territory, a necessary piece in his continental power games. He does not see the ghost of the girl he once claimed to love, nor does he see the mother you became in the darkness he cast you into. He invites you to a grand feast, a celebration of this new, proposed unity, intending to display you as a tamed wolf, a former stray brought back to the fold. But you are not the same girl. The fires of vengeance have forged you into something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous than the Alpha King could ever imagine. And you are not coming alone. The proof of his lie, the living, breathing heirs he declared could never exist, are with you, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to shatter his world as completely as he once shattered yours. You walk into his great hall, not as a supplicant, but as a queen of a nation, born from your own strength, a judge returning to the scene of the crime, ready to deliver a verdict that will echo through the annals of history. The air in the Obsidian Keep was different now, thick with the cloying scent of manufactured prosperity and the faint, metallic tang of fear. Elara breathed it in, letting the memories wash over her, not with pain, but with a chilling, clarifying focus. 5 years, 5 years since she had been dragged from this very hall, her pleas drowned out by the roar of King Theron's decree. He had called her barren, an impurity in his sacred bloodline, a slight against the moon goddess herself. The accusations, slick with the poison of his new consort Lyra's whispers, had sealed her fate. Exile. She was cast out into the unforgiving Frostfang expanse, a territory no one had ever tamed, left to die as a testament to the Alpha King's absolute authority. But she had not died. She had thrived. The expanse, which was meant to be her tomb, had become her crucible. She had united the scattered shifter clans, the outcasts and the forgotten, and built a nation from ice and will. The realm of the Veiled Peaks was now a power to be reckoned with, its resources coveted, its military strength respected. And so the summons had come, not an apology, not a plea for forgiveness, but a royal invitation. King Theron of the Sunstone Empire requested the presence of Queen Elara of the Veiled Peaks to discuss a treaty of mutual defense. He wrote of shared borders and common enemies, of a new era of cooperation. He wrote as if he were addressing a stranger, a fellow monarch he had only heard of through missives and envoys. There was not a single word acknowledging their past, not a hint of recognition. It was the ultimate insult and the perfect opportunity. Lord Calen, her most trusted advisor and the stoic commander of her armies, had stood beside her as she read the scrolled parchment. His face, usually a mask of granite, was tight with concern. "You cannot be considering this," he had stated, his voice a low rumble. "It is a trap. He means to humiliate you, to show his court that even the mighty Ice Queen comes when he calls." Elara had merely smiled, a slow, cold curving of her lips that did not reach her eyes. "Oh, I am quite sure that is his intention, Calen. He wishes to display me as his conquest, a rebellious territory brought to heel. He will toast to a future he controls, with me as a silent subordinate partner." She had trailed a finger over Theron's arrogant, flowing signature. He is a fool. He remembers a broken girl, not the queen I have become. He has forgotten the most important thing about me." Kaelin had waited, his gaze unwavering. "And what is that?" he asked. "That I forget nothing," she had replied, her voice dropping to a whisper of honed steel. "And I forgive even less." Now, standing at the precipice of the grand hall, she felt the weight of those 5 years settle upon her like a royal mantle. She was draped in shimmering silver silk that mimicked the glaciers of her homeland. Her dark hair, once a wild cascade, now intricately braided with threads of obsidian. She was no longer the trembling girl of 18 who had loved a king. She was a sovereign. Her arrival had been met with a wave of stunned silence, followed by a flurry of frantic whispers. The courtiers of Sunstone, who had jeered at her exile, now stared with a mixture of awe and apprehension. They saw the power that radiated from her, the unyielding strength in her posture. They did not see the tremor deep within her, the ghost of a heart that had once broken in this very room. She let her gaze sweep across the hall, a vast cavern of gold and crimson, until it landed on him, King Theron. He sat upon his throne of carved sunstone, looking every bit the magnificent, powerful ruler he believed himself to be. His silver hair caught the light of the 1,000 candles, and his eyes, the color of a stormy sky, were fixed on her. A slow, possessive smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. Beside him, Queen Lyra watched her with narrowed eyes, her perfectly beautiful face a mask of contemptuous victory. She was the viper who had whispered the lies, the architect of Alara's ruin. Her hand rested possessively on Theron's arm, a clear and constant declaration of her place. Alara met Theron's gaze and offered him a small, enigmatic nod, a gesture of a ruler acknowledging an equal, not a subject acknowledging her king. The subtlety was lost on him, but not on Lyra, whose lips thinned in fury. The king rose, his voice booming, across the suddenly silent hall. "Queen Alara, welcome back to the Sunstone Empire. We are honored by your presence. Let this feast mark the dawn of a new age of prosperity between our great nations." The words were a performance, a carefully crafted script for his audience. He was magnanimous, he was forgiving, he was in control. Alara began her slow, deliberate walk toward the dais, each step an echo of the ones she had been forced to take on her way out. The eyes of the entire court followed her, but she felt none of them. Her world had narrowed to the 3 figures on the dais: the king who had betrayed her, the woman who had orchestrated it, and the empty space where her own heart used to be. She was not here for a treaty. Treaties were for equals who respected each other. She was here for a reckoning. She was here to collect a debt, one that could only be paid in absolute public ruin. And as she ascended the steps, a cold, predatory calm settled over her. The game had just begun, and the king had no idea that he had already been checkmated 5 years ago. The memory was a shard of ice embedded in her soul, a wound that never truly healed, only froze over. It was the day the sun had died, the day the world had been rendered in shades of gray and crimson. The great hall had been just as grand, just as filled with the sycophantic nobility of the Sunstone Empire. But she had stood before the throne not as a visiting queen, but as the accused. She was 18, a hybrid of a noble Sunstone wolf line and a rogue shifter from the Shadowlands, a lineage that had always made her an object of suspicion and fascination. Theron, then a prince, soon to be crowned king, had claimed to love her for it. He had called her unique, a bridge between worlds, his moon and his stars. He had promised her a future, a crown, a dynasty. He had lied. The whispers had started subtly, like the rustle of snakes in dry leaves. Lyra, a pure-blood alpha of impeccable lineage, had been her lady-in-waiting, her confidant, her friend, and her betrayer. Lyra had wanted Theron, had wanted the crown, and Alara was the only obstacle. So she had begun to plant the seeds of doubt. "A hybrid's womb is often a barren field, my prince," she would murmur, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "The old blood magic is fickle. It craves purity." At first, Theron had dismissed it, his love a shield against the poison. But they had been trying for an heir for a year since their bonding, and Alara's belly remained flat. The pressure from the Council of Elders mounted. The king's line was paramount, and his hybrid mate was proving fruitless. Lyra's whispers grew bolder, twisting from concern to accusation. She spoke of ancient curses, of impure blood tainting the royal line, of Alara secretly meeting with emissaries from the Shadowlands. She manufactured evidence, a misplaced letter, a paid-off guard's false testimony, a planted vial of herbs known to prevent conception. The final damning piece was a healer, bribed and threatened by Lyra, who declared before the entire council that Alara was biologically incapable of carrying a pure-blood alpha's child. She was, the old man had croaked, utterly and irrevocably barren. That was the word that had broken him, barren. For an alpha king whose entire identity was built on legacy and lineage, it was the ultimate failure, the ultimate shame. His love, once a raging fire, turned to ash in an instant. His pride could not withstand the public humiliation. He needed a scapegoat, and she was the perfect target. The trial was a farce. She stood alone, her pleas for him to believe her, to remember their love, falling on deaf ears. He would not meet her eyes. He looked only at the council, at the jeering nobles, at Lyra, who stood by his side, her face a perfect portrait of sorrowful duty. Alara of the house of Valerius, his voice, the voice that had once whispered promises of eternity in her ear, was a thunderclap of judgment that echoed from the stone walls. "You have been found to be a blight upon this court. Your blood is a taint, your presence a curse. You have deceived the crown and proven yourself unworthy of the station you were granted." She had stared at him, her heart fracturing with every word. "Theron, please," she had whispered, the sound swallowed by the cavernous hall. "This is a lie, Lyra." He had raised a hand, silencing her. The look in his eyes was one she would never forget. It was not anger, not sadness. It was a cold, detached disgust. He was looking at an object, a mistake to be discarded. "You are barren," he declared, the word a hammer blow. "A hybrid who cannot continue, the royal line is of no use to the throne. You are a failure as a mate, a failure as a woman, a failure as an alpha. You have brought shame upon me, upon my ancestors, upon this kingdom." The crowd had roared its approval. They had always resented her, the dark-haired, green-eyed outsider. Now they had permission to hate her openly. He turned to the captain of the guard. "Strip her of her titles and her station. She is no longer my mate. She is nothing. Cast her out. Let her find her end in the Frostfang expanse. Her name is to be struck from the records. Let it be as if she never existed." The guards had seized her arms, their grips bruising. She had fought, not with strength, but with a desperate, final plea to the man she loved. "Theron, I am carrying your child." The words had burst from her, a truth she had only just confirmed herself that very morning, a secret she had been waiting to share with him in a moment of joy. For a fraction of a second, the world had held its breath. A flicker of something, doubt, hope, crossed his face. But then he looked at Lyra, who simply shook her head with a look of profound pity, as if Alara had been driven mad by her shame. "More lies," Lyra had whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. The desperate clutchings of a guilty mind. Theron's face had hardened back into a mask of cruel resolve. "A barren womb cannot bear fruit," he had spat, his voice laced with venom. "Do not insult my intelligence with such pathetic fantasies. You will say anything to save yourself. Take her away." That was the moment she had truly broken. Not when he had accused her, not when he had sentenced her, but when he had denied his own child. The guards had dragged her backward, her heels scraping against the polished marble floor. The last thing she saw was Lyra moving to stand beside Theron, placing a comforting hand on his arm as he stared ahead, refusing to watch the final act of his betrayal. The jeers and insults of the court had followed her out into the cold, unforgiving light. She was cast out with nothing but the clothes on her back and the impossible secret growing within her. That memory was the fuel that had kept her alive in the blizzard-racked wilderness. Every time she had wanted to give up, to lie down in the snow and let the cold take her, she would remember his face, the disgust in his eyes, the finality in his voice. Her survival was no longer about her own life. It became an act of defiance. Her vengeance would not be a sword in the dark or a vial of poison. It would be life. It would be the children he had denied, raised in her image, forged in the strength he had forced upon her. They would be her vindication, the living, breathing proof of his monumental, soul-destroying error. And now, as she stood before him once more, she could feel that icy shard in her soul, not as a source of pain, but as a weapon. He thought he was looking at a former lover he had discarded. He had no idea he was facing the consequences of his gravest sin. A ghost who had returned from the grave he had dug for her, bringing with her the truth that would be his undoing. The journey back to the Sunstone Empire had been a calculated display of power. Alara had not come with a small, humble retinue befitting a supplicant. She had arrived with a delegation of 500 of her elite Icefang warriors, their white wolf pelts and obsidian armor a stark and intimidating contrast to the gilded soldiers of the South. They moved with the silent, predatory grace of the apex predators they were, their presence a clear statement. She was not here to beg. Lord Kalin rode beside her, a mountain of quiet strength, his eyes constantly scanning, missing nothing. But the true power, the heart of her strategy, was not in her warriors or in her own regal bearing. It was housed in a heavily guarded carriage at the center of their procession, shielded from prying eyes. Her children, her twins, Liam and Lyra. She had named her daughter after her betrayer, a constant, bitter reminder of the purpose that drove her. It was a private irony she savored. They were 5 years old now, the living embodiment of her vengeance. They were breathtaking, a perfect, impossible fusion of their parents. Liam had her own raven black hair, but it was paired with Theron's unmistakable, piercing silver eyes. Eyes that could command legions and freeze hearts. Lyra, in a twist of fate, had inherited Theron's silken silver hair, but it framed a face with Alara's own defiant chin and her emerald green eyes, which held a wisdom far beyond her years. To see them was to see Theron and Alara intertwined, their lineage made manifest in a way no lie could ever deny. The scent of them alone was proof, the crisp ozone of her hybrid magic mingled with the unmistakable, earthy scent of Sunstone's ancient alpha bloodline. Any true shifter would recognize it instantly. She had raised them in the harsh but beautiful wilderness of the Veiled Peaks. They were not coddled princelings, they were survivors. She had taught them to track, to fight, to understand the language of the wind and the snow. But she had also taught them statecraft, history, and diplomacy. She had taught them what it meant to rule, not with arrogance, but with strength and compassion. Most importantly, she had taught them the truth, but she had framed it carefully. "Your father is a great king," she had told them one night, as they sat by the fire in their mountain fortress. But he was deceived by a wicked woman. He was made to believe a great lie, and it made him do a terrible thing. He sent us away because he did not know the truth. We are going to his home now, not to punish him, but to show him the truth. It was a gentler version of reality, one their young hearts could bear. There would be time enough for the harsher lessons of betrayal and pride when they were older. For now, they needed to see this as a mission to reclaim their family, not to destroy it. Liam, ever the serious one, had looked at her with his father's eyes. "Will he be happy to see us, Mother?" The question had been a dagger in her heart. "I do not know, my love," she had answered honestly, stroking his dark hair. "Kings are complicated, but he is your father, and the truth has a power all its own." Little Lyra, fierce and perceptive, had simply squeezed her hand. "We will protect you, Mother," she had whispered, and Alara knew she meant it. Kaelin had watched the exchange from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Later, he had approached her as she stood on a balcony overlooking the snow-covered peaks. "They are your greatest strength, my queen," he said, his voice low. "And your greatest vulnerability. Are you certain of this path? Once you reveal them, there is no turning back. You will either reclaim everything or lose it all." Alara had stared out at the endless expanse of white, the land that had saved her. "When Theron cast me out, he took everything from me, my home, my name, my love. He thought he had left me with nothing, but he was wrong. He left me with a reason to live, a reason to fight, a reason to become stronger than he ever imagined. He left me with them." She turned to face Kaelin, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "I am not afraid of losing, Kaelin. I have already lost everything once before. This time, I am not the one with anything to lose. He is. He has a kingdom, a queen, a legacy built on a lie. I am simply returning to show him the cracks in his foundation, and I will watch as the entire gilded monstrosity crumbles into dust at his feet." Her preparation was not merely for a political meeting, it was for a war, one that would be fought not with swords, but with truth. Her armor was her composure, her shield was her silence, and her ultimate weapon was the two small children who held a king's destiny in their innocent hands. As their carriage drew closer to the capital city of Sunstone, she could feel the change in the air, the warmth of the southern lands a stark contrast to her icy home. It felt foreign, suffocating. She reached into the carriage and took her children's hands. They looked up at her, their eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She squeezed their hands gently. "Remember what I told you," she said softly. No matter what happens, no matter what you see or hear, you are the children of the moon and the sun. You are the true heirs of two kingdoms. Be brave, be strong, and know that I will never, ever let anyone harm you." They nodded in unison, their small faces set with a determination that mirrored her own. They were ready. She was ready. The time for hiding in the shadows was over. The sun was about to set on Theron's reign, and she would be the one to bring the long, cold night. The great hall of the Sunstone Empire was a symphony of calculated opulence. Golden tapestries depicting legendary Alpha Kings hung from the vaulted ceilings, their thread of gold eyes seeming to watch the proceedings with silent judgment. The air was heavy with the scent of roasted meats, spiced wine, and the cloying perfumes of the southern nobility. It was a place designed to overwhelm, to impress upon any visitor the sheer, unassailable power of the throne. Ilara, however, was not overwhelmed. She felt a profound and chilling detachment, as if she were watching a play whose ending she had already written. She moved through the throng of curious and hostile nobles with a grace that was almost liquid, her silver gown a river of moonlight in the candlelit hall. Her guards, her formidable Icefang warriors, remained stationed at the grand entrance, a silent, menacing promise of the power she held at her back. Only Kaelin walked with her, a silent shadow at her side, his presence more intimidating than 1,000 shouting soldiers. Her arrival at the foot of the dais was the climax of the room's silent tension. The music faltered. Conversations died in mid-sentence. All eyes were on her and the king. Theron descended a single step from his throne, his hand outstretched, not in a gesture of welcome, but of command. He expected her to take it, to bow her head, to show deference. She ignored the hand completely, instead giving a slight, regal inclination of her head. "King Theron," she said, her voice clear and cool, carrying easily through the hushed hall. "Thank you for your invitation." The subtle emphasis on the word was a tiny barb, a reminder that she was here by his summons, not her own desire. Theron's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. He was not accustomed to being challenged, even in such a small way. He withdrew his hand, letting it rest on the pommel of his ceremonial sword. "The pleasure is all ours, Queen Ilara. The years have been kind to you." It was a backhanded compliment, implying that the wild, untamed girl he had known had been polished by time. He still saw her as a project, a piece of his past. "The Frostfang expanse is a harsh teacher," she replied smoothly, her gaze unwavering. "It strips away all that is unnecessary and leaves only what is essential for survival. It teaches one to see the world with clear eyes." Her eyes flickered for a moment to Lyra, who stood beside Theron, resplendent in a gown of blood-red silk. The viper! Lyra's smile was all teeth, a predatory bearing of enamel. "Indeed," Lyra purred, her voice a silken threat. "We are all so very relieved you not only survived, but prospered. It is a testament to your resilience." The word hung in the air, dripping with condescension. They were speaking in code, their words a dance of veiled insults and remembered pains. To the court, it was a tense but polite exchange between monarchs. To the three of them, it was the opening salvo of a war. Theron, ever the arrogant peacock, gestured to a seat of honor prepared to the right of the throne. A place for a valued guest, but one clearly subordinate to him and his queen. "Come, sit. Let us feast and speak of the future. The past is but dust and shadows." "Is it?" Ilara asked softly, her question a quiet challenge that seemed to suck the air from the dais. I find the past has a way of shaping the future, King Theron. It builds the foundation upon which we stand. A faulty foundation, and everything built upon it is destined to collapse. Theron's jaw clenched. He was growing impatient with her games. He wanted to get to the treaty, to the part where she acknowledged his superiority and pledged her resources to his cause. Metaphors are for poets, Queen Elara. We are rulers. Let us speak plainly. A new threat rises in the east. We are stronger together than apart. An alliance is the only logical path. He was trying to steer the conversation back to his script, to the reason he had summoned her. He was a man who hated surprises, who abhorred chaos. He built his world on order and control. Elara allowed a small, cold smile to touch her lips. I agree. Logic should guide us. She finally moved, ascending the remaining steps, but she did not go to the chair he had indicated. Instead, she stopped directly before him, forcing him to look her in the eye, to acknowledge her as an equal. The proximity was a shock, a breach of protocol. The court gasped. Lyra took a half-step forward, her hand instinctively going to Theron's arm. I am here to discuss the future of our kingdoms, Elara said, her voice low and intense, meant only for him and Lyra, though the entire hall strained to hear, and the foundation upon which any true alliance must be built: truth, honesty, and the settling of old debts. Theron's eyes, those stormy silver pools she had once drowned in, narrowed to slits. The charismatic, magnanimous king was gone, replaced by the ruthless alpha who had exiled her. You are treading on dangerous ground, Elara. Do not mistake my invitation for forgiveness. You are here because you are useful. Remember that. It was the confirmation she needed. He felt no remorse. He felt no regret. He saw her only as a tool. The last vestiges of the girl who had loved him died in that moment, replaced by the avenging queen. The ice in her soul hardened into a diamond edge. Oh, I will remember, she whispered, her voice a promise of devastation. And by the end of this night, so will you. She then turned with a grace that was almost contemptuous, and took the seat he had offered, arranging her silver gown around her, as if she were the one seated upon the true throne. The silent battle of wills was over for now. He thought he had put her in her place. He had no idea she had just positioned him perfectly for the slaughter. The feast was a grand, theatrical affair. Minstrels played in a high gallery, their melodies weaving through the cavernous hall. But the music felt thin, unable to mask the thick, humming tension that had settled over the court. Course after course of exotic foods were presented on platters of gold and silver, but Elara ate nothing. She nursed a single goblet of iced water, her senses on high alert, watching, waiting. She observed Lyra, the Serpent Queen, as she played her part to perfection. She laughed at Theron's jests, her tinkling laughter a sharp, unpleasant sound. She touched his arm constantly, a gesture of possession, her eyes flicking towards Elara again and again, seeking a reaction, a flicker of jealousy or pain. She found none. Elara's face was a mask of serene indifference. This infuriated Lyra more than any outburst could have. Elara's gaze drifted to Theron. He was holding court, his ego expanding to fill the hall. He spoke loudly of his victories, his ambitions, his vision for the continent. A vision in which her kingdom and its resources were a vital, and he assumed compliant component. He was so blinded by his own perceived magnificence that he was oblivious to the currents swirling around him. He did not see the way his own cousin, Duke Valerius, watched him with a hungry, calculating gaze. He did not see the nervous glances exchanged between the captain of his guard and one of Lyra's ladies-in-waiting. And he did not see the moment a royal steward, his hands trembling ever so slightly, approached the royal table with a fresh decanter of wine, meant only for the king. Elara saw it all. She had spent 5 years in the wilderness, learning to read the subtlest signs, the twitch of a wolf's ear, the scent of a predator on the wind. This court, with its hidden dangers and predatory smiles, was just another kind of wilderness. The steward poured the deep crimson liquid into Theron's goblet. As he did so, his eyes met Lyra's for a fraction of a second. A tiny, almost imperceptible nod passed between them. It was all Elara needed to see. The pieces clicked into place with chilling certainty. Lyra was not content to be queen. She wanted to be regent. She had likely produced a sickly heir, or perhaps no heir at all, and knew her position was precarious as long as Theron lived. With him gone, she could rule through a puppet council or a young child, cementing her own power absolutely. She had seen Elara's return, not as a threat, but as the perfect opportunity. Who would they blame for the king's sudden tragic death at a feast? The bitter, exiled hybrid queen, of course. It was a brilliant, ruthless plan. A wave of black irony washed over Elara. She had come here to orchestrate Theron's ruin, and here was his own wife, the architect of Elara's original fall, about to do it for her. For a moment, she considered letting it happen. Let him drink the poison, let him die. It would be a swift, if unsatisfying end to her quest for vengeance. But as he raised the goblet, preparing to offer a toast, she knew she couldn't allow it. His death was too easy. It would make him a martyr, a beloved king struck down by treachery. It would not expose his folly, his pride, his catastrophic mistake. It would not reveal the truth of his heirs. His ruin had to be absolute. It had to be public. It had to come from his own actions, his own words. He had to be alive to witness his world burn down around him, just as she had been. Her mind moved with lightning speed. She needed to warn him, but in a way that did not reveal her hand, in a way that would turn his own arrogance into the trigger for the confrontation she desired. She reached into a small, concealed pocket in her gown and retrieved a tiny slip of parchment and a charcoal stylus. Her fingers moved swiftly, her script sharp and clear. "Don't drink it. Smile and leave now." It was a command, not a plea. It was direct, urgent, and offered no explanation. It was designed to pique his curiosity and inflame his pride. A public spectacle was anathema to him. Leaving his own feast abruptly on the word of his exiled mate would be a show of weakness he could not abide. He would demand an explanation, and that was exactly what she wanted. The moment was upon them. Theron was on his feet, his goblet held high. "A toast," he boomed, his voice echoing through the hall. "To the future, to the Sunstone Empire and our new, powerful allies from the north, to an era of—" Elara rose from her chair, a vision of silver and ice. She glided towards him, her movement so fluid and unexpected that it silenced him mid-sentence. She held her own goblet of water as if she meant to join his toast. The court held its breath. What was she doing? She reached the dais and stood before him, her expression unreadable. "A noble toast, King Theron," she said, her voice a low murmur. "Perhaps you will allow me to add my own blessing." It was the perfect pretext. Under the cover of the movement, as she raised her goblet near his, she pressed the folded note into his palm, her fingers brushing his for a fleeting electric moment. His skin was warm, familiar. She recoiled from the sensation as if burned. She had done her part. Now it was up to him. She stepped back, her face a perfect, placid mask, and waited for the explosion she knew was coming. His arrogance was the poison, and she had just handed him the cup. Theron felt the small, crisp fold of parchment against his palm. For a moment, he was merely confused. His toast, his grand, magnanimous moment, had been interrupted. He looked at Alara, who stood before him, with an infuriatingly calm expression, her green eyes holding his, with an intensity that unnerved him. His gaze dropped to his hand. He uncurled his fingers, revealing the note. The silence in the hall was now absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Every eye was on him, on the small piece of paper that had so dramatically stolen the scene. His brows furrowed. He read the words, his mind processing them slowly at first, and then with a surge of hot, indignant anger. "Don't drink it. Smile and leave now." It was not a warning. It was a command, a threat. How dare she? How dare this woman, this exile he had magnanimously invited back from the brink of oblivion, attempt to control him in his own hall, in front of his entire court? All his simmering resentment, his buried guilt that he mistook for irritation, boiled over. He saw her not as a fellow monarch, but as the defiant girl he had cast out, still trying to manipulate him, to cause chaos. He imagined the scene, he, the great Alpha King, putting down his goblet and fleeing his own feast on the cryptic command of a hybrid witch from the north. The humiliation would be unbearable. His authority would be shattered. This was her plan, he thought with a surge of paranoid fury. To make him look weak, to sow discord, to ruin the very alliance she had supposedly come to forge. He made his choice in that instant, a choice born not of reason, but of pure, unadulterated pride. He would not be controlled. He would not be made a fool. He would unmask her pathetic little plot here and now. Instead of dropping the goblet, his grip tightened on it, and with his other hand he shot out and seized her wrist. The collective gasp of the court was a physical thing, a wave of shock that washed over the room. His fingers, strong and unyielding, closed around her delicate bones like a manacle. "You dare?" he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl that was far more terrifying than his public boom. He pulled her closer, forcing her to stand before him like a prisoner before a judge. "You come into my hall, you accept my hospitality, and you try to orchestrate a scene with these childish games?" He held up the note for all to see, his lip curled in a sneer. "Mysterious warnings, demands that I abandon my own celebration. What is your game, Alara? Did the isolation of the North drive you mad, or is this simply the bitter poison of a woman scorned?" Alara did not flinch. She did not struggle against his grip. She simply stood there, her expression unchanging, letting his accusations wash over her. She had predicted this. She had counted on his ego, on his predictable, arrogant rage. He was performing her script perfectly. "I would choose your next words very carefully, Theron," she said, her voice steady and cold, devoid of the fear he expected. "You are making a grave mistake." Her calmness infuriated him further. "I am making a mistake. I am the king. You are the one who comes to my throne with threats veiled as warnings. You are attempting to destabilize my court." He was playing directly into her hands. He had escalated the situation from a private whisper to a public spectacle. He had focused the entire court's attention on her, on the goblet in his hand, on the question of a threat. He had built the stage for her. All she had to do was perform. "I am not threatening your court," she said, her voice rising just enough to carry through the silent hall. "I am trying to save your life." The declaration hung in the air, audacious and shocking. Theron laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Save my life? From what? A poorly aged wine? You grow more pathetic by the moment." He turned his gaze to Lyra, who was watching the scene with wide, feignedly innocent eyes. "Did you hear that, my love? Our guest believes I am in mortal danger." Lyra stepped forward, her face a mask of concern. "My king, perhaps the queen is unwell. The journey from the north is arduous. Her mind may be confused." It was a masterful stroke, painting Alara as not only malicious but insane. But Alara was ready. She had seen this move coming 1,000 miles away. She turned her head slowly, her piercing green eyes locking onto Lyra. "Oh, my mind is perfectly clear, Queen Lyra. Clear enough to see a viper in a crown. Clear enough to recognize the scent of betrayal. It is a scent I have never forgotten." She then turned her gaze back to Theron, who still held her wrist in his iron grip. "The threat is not a fantasy, Theron. It is in the very goblet you hold in your hand. The wine you are about to drink is laced with Kantara's kiss." The name of the poison settled over the room like a death shroud. Kantara's kiss, a rare, fast-acting poison derived from a desert flower. It was tasteless, odorless, and utterly lethal. It mimicked the effects of a massive heart seizure, leaving almost no trace. It was the preferred tool of the most sophisticated assassins. Theron's sneer faltered for the first time. The name was too specific, too knowledgeable to be the ravings of a madwoman. A flicker of doubt, small but potent, entered his eyes. He looked from Alara's deadly serious face to the crimson wine in his cup. "You are lying," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "I am not," Alara stated, her voice ringing with absolute certainty. "And the person who wants you dead is standing right beside you." With that, she angled her body slightly and fixed her gaze directly on the beautiful, horrified face of Queen Lyra. The accusation was no longer veiled. It was a spear thrown directly into the heart of the queen's treachery. The real performance was about to begin. The entire court seemed to be frozen in a state of suspended animation. Theron's grip on Alara's wrist was the only point of contact in a tableau of shock and disbelief. All eyes swung from Alara to Lyra, who had paled dramatically, her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack at the edges. A traitor in the Sunstone Court was one thing. An accusation of regicide against the queen herself was unthinkable. Lyra, recovering quickly, summoned a look of profound, wounded outrage. "How dare you?" she cried, her voice trembling with manufactured fury. "You vile, bitter creature! You come back here after years in exile and spew these poisonous lies? You would accuse me, his loving, devoted wife, of such a monstrous crime?" She turned to Theron, tears welling in her perfect eyes. "My king, my love, can you not see what she is doing? She is trying to tear us apart. She has always been jealous of our bond. This is her pathetic, twisted revenge." Theron was caught between them, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and rage. His instincts screamed that Lyra, his pure-blood queen, was loyal. His pride insisted that Alara was a liar, trying to manipulate him. but the certainty in Alara's eyes, the specificity of the poison's name. It was a seed of doubt that was rapidly taking root. "Enough," he roared, his voice cracking like a whip. He released Alara's wrist, shoving her back a step. He needed to regain control of the situation, of his court, of the narrative. "These are treasonous accusations. You will provide proof, Alara, or your head will be on a spike before sunrise." This was the moment, the demand for proof. Proof? Alara's voice was laced with a cold, cutting amusement. "You want proof, Theron? The proof is in your hand. Or it would be in your heart within the next 10 minutes had you drunk it." She took a step forward, her confidence radiating from her, silencing any who might have dared to object. "But you want something more tangible, don't you? Very well." Her eyes scanned the dais, her gaze sharp and analytical. "Let us start with the steward who poured your wine. The one with the trembling hands and the scent of fear clinging to him like a cheap shroud. Where is he?" A frantic search began among the servants. The steward in question was found cowering behind a tapestry, his face ashen. He was dragged before the throne, where he collapsed into a blubbering mess. "He is terrified," Alara continued, her voice narrating the scene as it unfolded, "because he knows the penalty for his crime. But fear is a powerful motivator, perhaps not as powerful as whatever Queen Lyra offered him. Gold? A title? The safety of his family?" Lyra shrieked. "This is absurd. I have never seen this man before in my life." "Liar," Alara said, the word simple, flat, and devastating. She turned to the trembling steward. "Tell them," she commanded, her voice imbued with an alpha authority that transcended pack and kingdom. "Tell them who paid you to switch the king's private decanter with the poisoned one. Tell them the truth, and I promise you, the Queen of the North will see that your family is spared the consequences of your weakness." The man looked from Lyra's murderous glare to Alara's cold, promising gaze. He saw no hope in his own queen's eyes, only the promise of a silent death. He saw a sliver of a chance in the stranger's. "It was her," he sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at Lyra. "Queen Lyra, she said the king was growing weak, that a new, stronger ruler was needed. She promised me lands in the south for my family. She said no one would ever suspect." A tidal wave of murmurs and gasps swept through the hall. Lyra lunged at the man, her face contorted in a mask of pure hatred. "You lying worm, I'll have your tongue for this." Guards intercepted her, holding her back as she struggled like a cornered animal. Theron stared, his face a canvas of dawning horror. He looked at Lyra, truly looked at her, and for the first time he saw past the beautiful, docile facade to the ambitious predator beneath. But Alara was not finished. This was only the first layer of the foundation she was destroying. "The testimony of a frightened servant is a start," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "But it is not enough. You need irrefutable proof. Call the royal physician. Have him test the wine in the king's goblet. The reagents for detecting Kantara's kiss are complex, but they exist. A single drop on a silver plate, a touch of moonpetal essence. It should turn the deepest black." Theron, moving like a man in a dream, numbly gestured for the physician. The old man bustled forward, his face grim, carrying his medical kit. The entire hall watched in breathless silence as he conducted the test on a small, ornate table brought before the throne. He took a drop of the crimson wine with a glass pipette. He placed it on a polished silver disc. He added a single shimmering drop of a clear liquid from a vial. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a drop of ink and water, a spot of pure malevolent blackness spread across the silver. It was undeniable. The wine was poisoned. The steward had told the truth. Lyra's treason was laid bare for the entire world to see. A low, guttural sound of pure anguish escaped Theron's throat. He staggered back a step, his eyes fixed on Lyra, who now stood silently between her guards, her face a mask of utter ruin. The woman he had chosen, the pure-blood alpha he had exalted, had tried to murder him. The hybrid he had exiled, the woman he had shamed and discarded, had just saved his life. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, it was a poison all its own. He felt the world tilting on its axis, the solid ground beneath his throne turning to quicksand. But the architect of his despair was not finished with him. Elara had saved his life, only to take something far more precious. She had stripped away his queen. Now she would strip away his pride, his legacy, and his very identity. She took another step towards the throne, her expression softening into something that looked almost like pity, a look that was more insulting than any glare. "You see, Theron," she said, her voice now sorrowfully quiet, "Lyra's betrayal is not the only lie your life has been built upon. There is another, a much older, much deeper deception, the one that started all of this." He looked at her, his mind struggling to comprehend what more there could possibly be. His queen was a traitor. His life had been moments from ending. What could be worse than this? He was about to find out. The great hall was a maelstrom of silent, agonizing revelation. Lyra was being held by the guards, her face a collapsed mask of fury and despair, her treason exposed to the world. Theron stood as if turned to stone, his mind reeling from the twin impacts of his near assassination and his queen's betrayal. The foundation of his world had been fractured, but it had not yet crumbled. Elara knew that the final, devastating blow was yet to be struck. This was the moment she had rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times during the long, cold nights of her exile. It was the culmination of 5 years of pain, resilience, and burning, focused rage. She let the silence stretch, allowing the weight of the moment to press down on every soul in the room. Then she spoke again, her voice no longer a weapon, but a tool of dissection, carefully laying bare the rot at the core of Theron's reign. "5 years ago, in this very hall, you exiled me," she began, her voice soft but carrying to every corner. "You stood on that dais and you called me barren. You declared my hybrid blood a taint, an impurity incapable of carrying your precious, pure blood lineage. Every word was a precise, painful memory brought back to life." Theron flinched as if struck. The court shifted uncomfortably, the nobles who had jeered at her that day suddenly finding the floor fascinating. "You decreed that a barren womb cannot bear fruit," she continued, her eyes locking with his, refusing to let him look away. "You called my claim of pregnancy a pathetic fantasy, the desperate lie of a woman shamed. You erased my name from the records and cast me out to die, secure in the knowledge that your line would remain pure, carried forth by the new queen you had chosen." She gestured dismissively towards the now sobbing Lyra. "The pureblood queen who just tried to murder you. The pureblood queen who, I would wager, has failed to give you the strong, healthy air you so desperately crave." This was a calculated guess, but a safe one. Had Lyra produced a thriving son, her position would have been secure enough not to resort to such a desperate, risky assassination plot. The stricken look on Theron's face confirmed her guess. The kingdom's succession was likely a whispered, anxious secret. His legacy was already in jeopardy. "You built your reign on a pillar of pride," Elara said, her voice rising with righteous power. "Pride in your blood, pride in your judgment, pride in your strength. But that pillar was built on a faulty foundation. It was built on a lie." Theron finally found his voice, a raw, broken whisper. "What lie? What are you talking about?" Elara smiled, a slow, terrible, beautiful smile of pure vindication. "I told you the truth that day, Theron, and you were too proud, too blind, and too easily manipulated to believe it. You believed the whispers of a viper over the word of your own mate. You chose the lie because it was convenient, because it absolved you, because it fed your ego." She paused, letting the weight of his failure settle upon him. "You decreed that I was barren. You decreed that I could never give you an heir. You decreed that my blood was a stain." She took a deep breath, the final moment at hand. "And now, before this court, before your ancestors, and before the gods themselves, I am here to show you the catastrophic, world-shattering magnitude of your error." Her voice rang out, a command that echoed with the power of a true queen. "Lord Kaelin!" At the grand entrance to the hall, the doors that had been closed swung open. Lord Kaelin, who had been waiting for his cue, stepped inside. He was not alone. Holding each of his large, calloused hands were two small children, a boy and a girl. They stepped into the light of the great hall, their small figures poised and unafraid. A collective, audible gasp swept through the room, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. The children were living impossibilities. The boy, dressed in the dark blues of the north, had a head of thick, raven-black hair, so like Elara's. But his eyes, staring out at the stunned assembly with a calm, regal curiosity, were the exact, unmistakable shade of stormy, piercing silver as the king's. The girl, her silver hair a silken cascade that shimmered in the candlelight like a waterfall of moonlight, a perfect echo of Theron's own, turned her head slightly, and the light caught her eyes. They were a brilliant, fiery emerald green. Elara's eyes. The proof was absolute. It was undeniable. It was a truth so powerful it needed no words. The very sight of them was a judgment. Lineage, scent, features. Every shifter instinct in the room screamed the same truth. These were the children of Theron and Elara. These were the true-born heirs of the Sunstone Empire. Elara's voice cut through the stunned silence, each word a hammer blow to Theron's crumbling reality. "Behold, King Theron," she declared, her voice ringing with 5 years of suppressed pain and triumph. "Behold the fruit of my barren womb. Behold Liam and Lyra, your son and your daughter, your firstborn, your true heirs, the legacy you threw away." She looked at him, at the shattered man on the throne, and delivered the final, devastating verdict. "You did not exile a barren woman. You exiled your queen, pregnant with your children. You exiled your dynasty." The world had ceased to make sense. Theron's mind, once a fortress of certainty and command, was now a ruin, assaulted by a truth so profound it shattered the very laws of his reality. He stared at the children, the boy with his eyes, the girl with his hair. He saw his own father in the boy's proud stance, his mother in the girl's delicate features. It was like looking at a reflection in a fractured mirror, a distorted image of a life he should have had. The senses of an alpha wolf were undeniable, a primal truth that superseded thought. From across the hall, he could smell them. Beneath the scent of cold mountain air and the faint, crisp ozone of Alara's hybrid magic, there was another scent, one he knew as well as his own heartbeat. It was the scent of his own bloodline, the ancient earthy aroma of the Sunstone wolves. It was on them, it was in them. They were his son, his daughter. The words echoed in the desolate chambers of his soul. His heirs, a torrent of memories violently suppressed for 5 years, rushed back in a devastating flood. Alara's face on the day of her trial, her eyes wide with desperate sincerity, her voice crying out, "Theron, I am carrying your child," and his own voice dripping with contempt. "A barren womb cannot bear fruit. Do not insult my intelligence with such pathetic fantasies." The fantasy was real. The lie had been his life. He looked at Lyra, the woman he had chosen. Her face was streaked with tears of rage and humiliation. She had given him nothing but deceit, treason, and a barren bed. He had chosen her purity, her flattery, her lies, over the woman who had carried his legacy. He had traded a diamond for a shard of glass. His gaze swung back to Alara. She was not gloating. There was no triumphant smirk on her face. There was only a vast, empty stillness, the calm of a storm that has passed, leaving devastation in its wake. She had not come here for revenge in the way he understood it, with swords and fire. She had come here with the truth, a weapon far more cruel and effective. She had not come to kill him. She had come to force him to live with what he had done. The weight of his folly was a physical pressure, crushing the air from his lungs. Every decision he had made for the past 5 years had been based on the foundational lie of Alara's barrenness. His marriage to Lyra, the alliances he had forged, the treaties he had signed, the laws he had enacted, all of it, every single brick in the edifice of his reign, was built on sand. And the tide had just come in. He saw his future spooling out before him, a kingdom in chaos, his authority destroyed, his name a byword for foolhardy pride for generations to come. He would be Theron the blind, Theron the oathbreaker, Theron the fool king who had exiled his own children. The goblet, still in his hand, slipped from his numb fingers. It hit the marble floor with a loud clang that echoed through the unnaturally silent hall. The poisoned red wine, the symbol of Lyra's betrayal, spilled out like blood, pooling at his feet. It was the perfect, damning punctuation to the end of his world. He stumbled backward, away from the evidence of his ruin, away from the sight of the children who should have been his pride and joy. He bumped against the cold, hard sunstone of his throne, the seat of a power he no longer deserved, a power that now felt like a mockery. "No," he whispered, the sound a ragged, desperate plea to the universe, to rewind time, to undo the irreversible. It cannot be. But it was. The proof was standing before him. 2 small children, with his eyes, his hair, his blood. They were looking at him, not with anger or fear, but with a quiet, questioning curiosity. They were looking at their father, the man who had thrown them away before they were even born. He looked from them to Alara, and in her calm green eyes, he finally saw the truth, not just of his mistake, but of what he had lost. He had not just lost an heir, he had lost her. He had lost the fierce, loyal, passionate woman who had loved him, and in his blindness, he had reforged her into this magnificent, terrifying, avenging queen, who now stood as his living judgment. the Alpha King of the Sunstone Empire, the man who commanded armies and bent nations to his will, was utterly and completely broken. His ruin was not a matter of politics or power anymore. It was a devastation of the soul, a wound from which he would never, ever recover. Alara watched the complete and utter collapse of the man who had once been her entire world. She saw the recognition dawn, the horror bloom, and the soul-deep agony take root in his eyes. She felt a phantom echo of her own past pain, but it was distant, muted. The fire of her vengeance had burned so hot for so long that all that remained was a cold, quiet emptiness. Her purpose was fulfilled. The truth was revealed. His ruin was absolute, and most importantly, self-inflicted. She had merely held up a mirror, and he had shattered at the sight of his own reflection. She would not stay to watch the pieces be swept away. That was beneath her. She had not come to reclaim him or his throne. She had come for vindication, and she had it. She turned her back on the broken king and the chaotic court. She walked down the steps of the dais, her silver gown whispering against the marble floor, the only sound in the vast, stunned hall. She walked towards her children, her true kingdom, her real legacy. Liam and Lyra ran to her, their small hands finding hers. They looked back at the man on the throne, their expressions confused. "Is that him, Mother?" Liam whispered, his silver eyes, so like his father's, full of questions. "Is that our father?" "Yes, my love," Alara said softly, her voice for them alone. That was him. The use of the past tense was deliberate. In that moment, he had ceased to exist for her in any meaningful way. He was a memory, a mistake, a ghost at a feast. She squeezed their hands and led them towards the great doors, towards Lord Kalin, who waited with a look of profound, solemn respect on his face. As she reached the center of the hall, she paused. Without turning around, she spoke one last time, her voice calm and clear, a final decree to the man she was leaving in the ruins. "You decreed my exile, Theron. You stripped me of my name and my home. Now I decree your irrelevance. Rule over your kingdom of lies and shadows. It is all you have left." With that, she continued her walk, each step taking her further from the past and deeper into the future she had built for herself. She did not look back. She did not need to. She could feel the weight of hundreds of pairs of eyes on her, the eyes of a court that now understood the monumental power of the woman their king had so foolishly discarded. She and her children, flanked by the stoic Lord Kalin, swept out of the great hall, leaving behind a power vacuum and a shattered king. The aftermath in the Sunstone Empire was swift and brutal. Queen Lyra, her treason undeniable, was executed for her crimes before the next moon. King Theron, a hollow shell of the leader he once was, fell into a deep, brooding paralysis. His authority was gone, his spirit broken. The story of his folly spread like wildfire through the 7 kingdoms, a cautionary tale whispered by nobles and commoners alike. His reign, once so glorious, became a long, slow decline into obscurity. He never remarried. He never had another child. The great Sunstone lineage, the pure bloodline he had sacrificed everything to protect, ended with him. Alara returned to the Veiled Peaks not as a woman seeking refuge, but as a victorious queen returning to her true home. She ruled with wisdom, strength, and a compassion born of her own suffering. Her kingdom prospered, a beacon of strength and resilience in the north. Her children, the heirs of 2 bloodlines, grew into remarkable leaders, possessing her intelligence and his strength. tempered by the humility their father had so tragically lacked. She had achieved the ultimate revenge, not one of fire and blood, but one of life and prosperity. She had not destroyed her enemy. She had simply built a better world without him, a world where his absence was a blessing. Her victory was in her happiness, in her children's laughter, echoing through the halls of her mountain keep, in the peace and strength of the nation she had forged from ice and will. She had taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into the foundation of her greatest triumph. Was she right to seek such a devastating public revenge? Did Theron deserve the utter ruin she delivered? Or should she have vanished into the north, leaving the past to its ghosts? Some would call her actions cruel, a cold and calculated destruction of a man. Others would call it justice, a righteous and necessary balancing of the scales. What do you think? Was her vengeance a masterpiece of strategy, or a monument to a heart frozen by hatred? Let me know your verdict in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of epic reckoning.